Have you ever been made to feel worthless by the very person who should have celebrated you? Have you ever had your heart, offered with love, thrown back in your face in front of the world? For Leo, that moment came on the day that was supposed to be the happiest of his sister's life. The grand ballroom was a sea of 500 faces, a glittering ocean of wealth and influence his sister, Chloe, had so desperately wanted to swim in. Leo stood near the gift table, his hands feeling rough and clumsy compared to the silk and crystal that surrounded him. He wasn't a man of means. He was a cook, an older brother who had spent more time raising Chloe than their own absent father ever had. His gift wasn't on her registry of designer appliances and exotic honeymoons. It was a heavy, hand-bound leather album. Inside, he had carefully restored every faded photograph of their childhood, from scraped knees to shared ice creams, from her first day of school to the day he taught her how to ride a bike. On the last page, he'd written a simple note: "Remember where we came from, Chloe." It's what makes you strong. When she finally opened it, surrounded by her new, wealthy friends, her smile was a tight, brittle thing. She flipped through the pages with disdain. "What is this?" she asked, her voice carrying across the hushed room. One of her bridesmaids giggled. "Is that you with the bad haircut, Chloe?" Chloe's face flushed with crimson embarrassment. She looked at Leo, not as a brother, but as a stain on her perfect day. "You are always trying to embarrass me," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Bringing our past into my future. Can't you see I've moved on from that?" She gestured vaguely, as if their shared history was a pile of garbage. Leo's heart fractured. "Chloe, I just thought," he began, his voice thick with emotion. But he never got to finish. With a swift, shocking movement, Chloe's hand arced through the air. The sound was a sharp, ugly crack that sliced through the clinking of champagne glasses and the soft music. It echoed in the cavernous room. A collective gasp rippled through the 500 guests. Silence. Leo stood frozen, the stinging imprint of his sister's hand blazing on his cheek. It wasn't just the physical pain, it was the sheer, brutal force of the rejection, a public execution of their bond. Her eyes, cold and furious, met his for a split second before she turned away, tossing the album onto the gift table with a clatter, as if it were trash. In that moment, Leo wasn't her brother. He was just a ghost from a life she was desperate to forget. The world swam in a blur of shocked faces and whispering mouths. Leo didn't feel the floor beneath his feet as he turned and walked away, a hollow ringing in his ears louder than any wedding bell. He pushed through the ornate doors and found himself in a cold, marble-floored corridor, the festive music now a muffled, mocking thrum. He leaned against the wall, the chill seeping through his ill-fitting suit jacket, his hand rising to his cheek where the fire of humiliation still burned. He didn't notice his mother, Maria, until she was standing right in front of him. Her face, usually soft with a weary kindness, was a mask of cold fury. Her eyes were not on his reddened cheek, but on the closed doors to the ballroom, as if she could incinerate them with her gaze. She wasn't the type for gentle cooing or platitudes. Maria was forged from hardship, a woman who understood that the world only respected strength. She said nothing for a long moment, simply taking in the sight of her son, shattered and publicly shamed by her daughter. Her hand came up, not to soothe his face, but to grip his arm, her fingers surprisingly strong. "Don't you dare let her break you," she said, her voice a low, intense whisper. What she did in there, that wasn't about a book of pictures. It was about her own fear. She's afraid she doesn't belong in that world, so she tried to cast you out to prove she does. Leo just shook his head, unable to form words. The betrayal was a stone in his throat. Maria's grip tightened. "You will not cry for her. You will not let this be the story they tell about you. You are my son. You have a fire in you that she has tried to stomp out your entire life." She leaned closer, her eyes locking onto his, and in them, he saw not comfort, but a call to arms. A demand for justice. She said the words that would echo in his soul for the next year, the words that would become both his fuel and his torment. "You will make her regret that day forever, Leo. You will build a life so full of worth, so bright with success, that the memory of her hand on your face will be a source of eternal shame for her. Make her regret it." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. A prophecy. It wasn't about petty revenge. It was about a resurrection. Leo looked from his mother's fierce, unwavering eyes to the ballroom doors, behind which his sister was now celebrating the life she had purchased at the cost of his dignity. A new feeling began to smolder beneath the pain, a cold, hard resolve. Back inside the opulent ballroom, the shock of the slap was quickly being papered over with more champagne and louder music. Chloe, ever the performer, had dabbed at crocodile tears and allowed her new husband, Richard, to console her, painting Leo as the unstable, jealous brother who had tried to ruin her day. Her friends and new in-laws murmured sympathetically, casting judgmental glances toward the door through which Leo had vanished. But a new, more tangible crisis was brewing, one that couldn't be dismissed with gossip. In the kitchen, chaos reigned. The celebrity chef Chloe had hired at an exorbitant price, a man known for his volatile temper and molecular gastronomy, had a spectacular meltdown. A crucial refrigeration unit had failed, spoiling the delicate, expensive seafood meant for the main course. In a fit of rage, the chef had abandoned his post, taking his entire staff with him, leaving behind a half-prepped disaster and a trail of curses. The news trickled out slowly at first, in the frantic whispers of the wedding planner. Soon, the delay became undeniable. The groom's father, Mr. Arthur Harrison, a man who ran a multi-billion-dollar empire with quiet, ruthless efficiency, noticed the shift. He was a man who detested incompetence. The wedding was not just a family affair, it was a statement, a merger of his family's old money with his son's ambitions. He cornered the frantic planner, his voice dangerously calm. "What is the problem?" he demanded. The planner, sweating through his tuxedo, stammered about a culinary setback. Mr. Harrison's eyes narrowed. He strode towards the kitchen, ignoring the attempts to stop him. He pushed open the swinging doors and was met with a scene of utter pandemonium. Empty stations, spoiled food, and a skeleton crew of terrified venue staff who had no idea what to do. Chloe, hearing the commotion, followed him in, her face pale with horror. Her perfect day, her meticulously crafted illusion, was crumbling into a 500-guest famine. "This is a catastrophe," she shrieked, her voice shrill with panic. "My wedding is ruined." Mr. Harrison looked at the mess, then at Chloe's hysterical display, and a deep, weary frustration settled over him. He saw not a bride in distress, but a frivolous girl whose obsession with appearances had led to this very real, very expensive disaster. Leo sat in his small, sparsely furnished apartment above the diner where he worked. The sounds of the city were a familiar comfort, a world away from the gilded cage he had just fled. The suit felt like a costume, and he tore it off, throwing it into a corner. He was back in his element, a faded t-shirt, worn jeans, and the lingering scent of onions and garlic that clung to everything he owned. He pulled a tub of leftover dough from his fridge, his hands moving with an unconscious grace, kneading and shaping it on his small wooden countertop. It was his therapy, the one place where his thoughts fell silent and his hand spoke a language of creation and care. His phone buzzed violently on the counter. It was his mother. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Finally, with a sigh of resignation, he answered. "Leo." Thank God, Maria's voice was rushed. "You need to come back." Leo's blood ran cold. "No. I'm never going back there. Not after what she did." "It's not about her," his mother insisted. "It's a disaster. The chef quit. There's no food, Leo. 500 people, and the kitchen is empty. Mr. Harrison is losing his mind. Chloe is, well, she's Chloe." A bitter laugh escaped Leo's lips. "Good. Let her perfect party fall apart. She deserves it." A long silence stretched over the line. Then, his mother's voice, softer now, but with a strategic edge. "She does. But what about you? What about what I said? An army is useless without a battlefield, Leo. Right now, there is a war happening in that kitchen. And you are the only soldier who knows how to fight." The word struck a chord deep within him. A battlefield. An opportunity. Not for Chloe. For him. He looked at his hands, dusted with flour. He thought of the years he'd spent in sweltering kitchens, learning, perfecting his craft, a craft his own sister saw as lowly and coarse. He thought of her slap, the sting of it, the utter dismissal. And he thought of his mother's command, make her regret it. He could stay here, in the safety of his solitude, nursing his wound. Or he could walk back into the fire, not as her shamed brother, but as the solution. "I'll be right there," he said, his voice steady and clear. He wasn't going back for Chloe. He was going back for himself. When Leo pushed open the kitchen doors for the second time that night, the scene was even worse than his mother had described. It was a portrait of abandonment. Pans were scattered, half-chopped vegetables were wilting on counters, and the acrid smell of spoiled fish hung in the air. The few remaining staff members looked lost, like soldiers without a general. And in the middle of it all stood Mr. Harrison, his face a thundercloud, and Chloe, weeping dramatically in a corner. Leo ignored them all. He walked to the center of the room, pulling off his jacket and rolling up his sleeves. He found a clean apron and tied it around his waist. The simple, familiar action centered him. He surveyed the wreckage not with panic, but with a chef's calculating eye. He saw not what was lost, but what remained. There were crates of potatoes and onions, sacks of flour, wheels of good cheese, robust winter vegetables, and high-quality cuts of beef that hadn't been touched. He saw the building blocks of something real, something honest. He said, his voice cutting through the tension, pointing to a young, terrified busboy. "Start peeling every potato you can find. He pointed to a dishwasher, chop these onions. Finally. And to a waitress, fire up every oven." Now the authority in his voice was absolute. They stared at him, confused, until Mr. Harrison grunted, "Do as he says." The staff, grateful for any direction, scrambled to obey. Chloe looked up, her tear-streaked face a mixture of confusion and disgust. "Leo? What are you doing? Get out of here. You're making things worse." Leo didn't even look at her. He was already at a stove, his hands a blur as he rendered beef fat in a massive cast-iron skillet, the sizzle and pop the first notes of a rising symphony. He worked with a fierce, focused energy, transforming the chaos into controlled, purposeful motion. The air began to change, the smell of despair replaced by the rich, soulful aromas of garlic, herbs, and searing meat. Mr. Harrison stood silently by the door, his arms crossed, watching. He had seen leaders his entire life, in boardrooms and on trading floors. He knew one when he saw one. He was watching a master at work, an artist in his studio. Leo was not just cooking, he was commanding, creating, breathing life back into a dead room. He was building something from nothing, with a grace and passion that was utterly mesmerizing. The first dishes to leave the kitchen were not fancy. They were plates of crispy, golden potato hash, rich with caramelized onions and herbs. They were followed by platters of slow-braised beef, so tender it fell apart with a touch, served alongside rustic, handmade bread that was still warm from the oven. It was food that didn't whisper, it sang. It was comfort. It was soul. Out in the ballroom, the starving, disgruntled guests fell silent as the platters arrived. The first tentative bites were followed by murmurs of surprise, then delight. "My word, what is this?" one guest asked. "It's incredible." The atmosphere of the entire wedding shifted. The tension dissipated, replaced by a warm, communal hum of pure satisfaction. The food was better than anything the celebrity chef could have conceived. It was real. It was memorable. Mr. Harrison took one bite of the beef and closed his eyes. It was a flavor that reminded him of his own mother's cooking, a taste of authenticity he hadn't experienced in decades of frequenting the world's finest restaurants. He walked back into the kitchen, which was now a well-oiled machine under Leo's command. He stood before the young man, who was wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his arm, his face streaked with flour and grease, looking more regal than anyone in the ballroom. "Who are you?" Mr. Harrison asked, his voice quiet with respect. Leo finally looked at him, his eyes tired but clear. "I'm Leo." Chloe's brother. Mr. Harrison's face remained impassive, but a flicker of understanding crossed his features. The brother she had slapped. the brother she had called an embarrassment. The irony was staggering. He saw it all in that instant, the shallow pursuit of status in the ballroom versus the profound substance and character standing right here in this kitchen. He saw the truth. "The food you just made," Mr. Harrison stated, "is the only honest thing that has happened all night." He pulled a business card from his wallet. It was heavy, made of black metal, with nothing but his name and a private number. "I am opening a new flagship hotel in the city center. The restaurant has no chef." "It does now." "Name your price." "I don't care what it is." "I want you." Leo stared at the card, then at the powerful man in front of him. This was it. The battlefield his mother had spoken of. This was the first shot fired in a war he now knew he could win. The news of Mr. Harrison's offer spread through the family like wildfire. Richard, Chloe's new husband, was impressed. "My father doesn't make offers like that, Chloe. Your brother must be something special." But Chloe was horrified. The idea of her greasy spoon brother ascending into her new, rarefied world was a nightmare. She became the very embodiment of the cynical gatekeeper, determined to protect her fragile status by keeping him down. The next day, she went to her father-in-law's office, a place of intimidating leather and polished wood. "Arthur," she began, using his first name with a familiarity she hadn't earned, "I'm so glad you see potential in Leo, but I have to warn you. He's not reliable." She painted a picture of Leo as a drifter, a man who couldn't hold down a real job, who was content with his lowly station. "He's just a line cook at a diner. This is too big for him. He'll embarrass you. He'll embarrass our family." Mr. Harrison listened patiently, his fingers steepled, his eyes unreadable. He had built an empire by reading people, by seeing past the polished resume to the core of their character. He had seen Leo's character under extreme pressure. And he had seen Chloe's. When she was finished, he said simply, "Thank you for your concern, Chloe. But my decision is final. I trust what I saw with my own eyes more than what you are telling me." Chloe left his office defeated and seething. Her attempt to sabotage Leo had only solidified Mr. Harrison's resolve. Leo, meanwhile, accepted the offer. He walked away from the diner, from his small apartment, and into the fire of creating a world-class restaurant from scratch. He poured every bit of his being into it. The pain of his sister's rejection, the fire of his mother's words, the years of overlooked passion, it all became his fuel. He worked 18-hour days, designing the menu, training his staff, obsessing over every detail. He named the restaurant The Hearth, a tribute to the warmth and authenticity he wanted to create. He was no longer just a cook, he was a creator, an artist finally given a grand canvas. He was building his new life, brick by brick, dish by dish, proving not to Chloe, but to himself, that the fire inside him was real. A year flew by. The Hearth was not just a success, it was a phenomenon. It became the most sought-after reservation in the city. Critics didn't just praise the food, they wrote poems about it. They spoke of its soul, its honesty, its ability to feel both innovative and deeply familiar. Leo was no longer an anonymous cook. He was Chef Leo, a celebrated culinary star. His face appeared in magazines, his story, the underdog who saved the wedding and won over a billionaire, a modern fable. He remained humble, often found in the kitchen long after closing, sharing a beer with his dishwashers, the same way he always had. He never forgot where he came from. Chloe's life, in stark contrast, had begun to unravel. The gilded cage was colder than she'd imagined. The Harrison family valued integrity, hard work, and substance, all the things Leo embodied and she had long disdained. Her obsession with fashion and gossip felt hollow in their world of philanthropy and industry. Her marriage to Richard was strained, he was growing tired of her superficiality and constant insecurity. She saw Leo's success everywhere. His face on a magazine cover in her dentist's waiting room. Friends of her in-laws gushing about their meal at the Hearth, each mention was a fresh twist of the knife. The brother she had cast out was now the toast of the town, celebrated by the very people she so desperately wanted to impress. The slap at the wedding was no longer a distant memory of her triumph, but a looming shadow of her cruelty. Her mother's words to Leo echoed in her own mind, a haunting premonition. Was she starting to regret that day? The thought was a bitter pill, one she wasn't yet ready to swallow. Her jealousy curdled into a desperate need to reclaim some sense of control, to put him back in the box she had created for him. Her perfect life was a facade, and the cracks were starting to show for everyone to see. One rainy evening, Chloe appeared at the service entrance of the hearth. She was dressed impeccably, but her face was drawn, her usual confidence replaced by a nervous tension. She asked to see Leo. The sous chef, fiercely loyal to the man who had given him his start, was about to turn her away, but Leo saw her from across the bustling kitchen. He wiped his hands on his apron and walked over, his expression unreadable. He led her not to a pristine table in the dining room, but to his small, cluttered office, a space filled with cookbooks and handwritten notes. "Chloe," he said, his voice even. "What are you doing here?" She tried to smile, a brittle, unconvincing thing. "Leo, I wanted to see you. To tell you how proud I am. We're family." After all, the words hung in the air, hollow and self-serving. Leo leaned back against his desk, his arms crossed. He had played this conversation in his head 1,000 times. He felt no anger, only a profound, weary clarity. "Family? Is that what we are? The last time we were together, you slapped me in front of 500 people because you were ashamed of a book of photographs." Chloe flinched, the color draining from her face. I wasn't myself. The stress of the wedding." "No," Leo cut her off, his voice firm but not cruel. "You were exactly yourself, Chloe. That was the most honest version of you I've ever seen. You were ashamed of me. You were ashamed of where we came from. You thought I would hold you back from the life you wanted." He paused, letting the truth settle between them. "I need you to know," he continued, "I never did any of this for revenge. I never wanted to hurt you." He looked her directly in the eye. "Mom told me that night to make you regret that day forever. I thought she meant I should make you pay. But I was wrong. I understand now what she really meant. I wasn't supposed to make you regret it by tearing your life down. I was supposed to make you regret it by building mine up so high that you would finally be forced to see the man you slapped, to see the brother you threw away. I was supposed to make you regret your own blindness. To make you look back and be ashamed not of me, but of yourself." Chloe stared at him, her carefully constructed composure finally shattering. His words were not an attack, they were a mirror, and the reflection was unbearable. She saw the slap not from her perspective of panicked embarrassment, but from his, a moment of profound cruelty delivered by the person who should have been his greatest ally. She saw the photo album not as a cheap token, but as a priceless offering of love she had trampled underfoot. The years of his quiet support, the sacrifices he'd made for her when they were young, the steady, unassuming love he had always offered, it all came rushing back, crashing against the wall of her ambition and shame. A sob, raw and ugly, tore from her throat. The tears that came were not the performative drops from her wedding day, they were real, scalding tears of genuine remorse. "I'm so sorry, Leo," she whispered, the words fractured and broken. "I was so stupid. So scared. So cruel. You were always the good one. You were always the strong one. I was the one who was weak." Leo didn't rush to comfort her. He simply stood there, allowing her the dignity of her own breakdown, the catharsis she needed to have. In that moment, he felt a release. The wound she had inflicted, the one he had carried for a year, finally began to heal. It wasn't about forgiveness, not yet. It was about understanding. He had fulfilled his mother's command. He had made Chloe regret that day, not by becoming a monster, but by forcing her to finally see the good man she had tried to destroy. The path to her redemption would be long and difficult, and it was one she would have to walk alone. But for the first time, she was facing in the right direction. Leo, now free from the weight of his past, could finally look toward his own future, a future built not on proving others wrong, but on the quiet, unshakable confidence of his own worth. His success was not his revenge, it was his liberation. And so we have to ask ourselves, how do we measure a person's value? Is it by the clothes they wear, the money they have, or the company they keep? Or is it found in the quiet integrity of their work, the resilience of their spirit, and the kindness in their heart? Leo's story reminds us that true worth is not something that can be given or taken away by others. It is forged in the fires of our own character. It is the hidden light within us that waits for its moment to shine. Never be the person who tries to extinguish that light in someone else. Instead, be the one who sees it, who fans the flame, who celebrates the hidden gems among us. Share this story if you believe that everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are, and remind someone today that their past does not define their future. The greatest success is not in making others regret their judgment, but in becoming so undeniably yourself that their judgment no longer matters.